last week on this series. So you'll have me, but not up here. But well, I appreciate it. Now, let's turn over to number 16. Now, I enjoyed this class and enjoyed presenting God's word and taking different types of views. This has been we read about bad people, but we never had focused on a series of like this. So, and I was reminded of yesterday of a poem that it's kind of a prose poem that reminded me that a lot of times when we look at our enemies, we're looking at ourselves, and we need to be aware that we don't fall into something like this. Okay, so hopefully that's what we tried to do, is not only how to deal with evil people in our lives, not to fall into their trap. And there is and I think that's not going to be different from what we're looking at today. Today we're going to be looking at Korah, Dathan, and Abiram in number 16. If you want to go over to number 16, there's an old Aesop fable called The Wolf and the Lamb. And the lamb was drinking at a brook, and the wolf came up and started talking to him about how dare you be drinking out of my brook. And the lamb said, well, you're messing up the mud, and he said, well, you can't be, because you're upstream from me, and all anything I'm doing is going downstream. And he just kept making little excuses and little things, and until finally he said, well, he said, I'm going to eat you for lunch anyway. So the more of the story, and I don't want to go through the whole story, I've got a little bit of short time, but the moral of his story is the tyrant can always find an excuse for his tyranny. And so when someone is going to go through, and we're talking about a rebellion, and if there's a rebellion in whether it be in a country, whether it be in a workplace, or even at a congregation, there's a rebellion. People that are intent on being rebellious are going to find an excuse. They're going to find that means. And so we have to be very aware, very, in fact, I remember back, if y'all remember I don't know if y'all remember the Boston movement, how that kind of got going. And if I remember how I was kind of brought in initially, and thought, hey, there's some pretty good ideas here, And I started following it. Then I had some great brothers that came back and said, here's the danger. Now, I wasn't adamant about it, but I could see how easily people can get duped into something like that. And there's some adamant brothers that said, now here's the danger in something like that, and it made sense. And so the Lord saw to it that I was caught in time. Not that I was going to move to Boston, but actually, do what? Yeah, humans got involved, right? Yeah. So I don't even remember the details about it. I just remember that I was also back in remember that book, The Late Great Planet Earth, and man, it captivated me for about half the book, and then I realized that. Then I said, well, wait a minute, he's basing his whole argument, his whole thing behind a certain fact, and I went back in the beginning of the book and looked at that fact, and that was just a theory of his. That was just a conjecture. It wasn't biblical. I just tossed it. And so it's easy for us to get duped into something like that if we're not being aware, and meaning that you got to be well versed in the Word of God and go to the Bible continually so you can combat against that. Well, that's kind of off nature of what we're looking at today. Let's look at number 16, and what's one of the themes, I guess, from the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt? What was one of the things that they did all the time? Grumble and complain. Grumble and complain, grumble and complain. Even to the point that said, hey, you brought us out of, he brought us out where we had 3 meals a day. You know, it's kind of like a person in jail. I got 3 meals a day, and now I'm out here having to actually scrap for my food. Um, and so there was a rebellion that came up in chapter 16 of Numbers. It says, now Korah, the son of Itzar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, that's the name actually, On, the son of Peleth, the sons of Reuben, took action. Okay. Now, there's 3 of them that they were talking about, because On, the son of Peleth, there's not much on him at all after this verse. So he either came to his senses, or he lost nerve, or did something. So he's not in it. But there's 4 that started, and the others, but there's 3 that kept going. Now, if you look at this, if you look at that lineage there, Korah, the son of Izar, the son of Kobath, the son of Levi. What is Levi? What does that mean? Who were they? Yeah, yeah, they were Levi's, and they were going to start a rebellion. So a rebellion is an open, organized, and armed resistance to one's government or ruler, a resistance to or defiance of an authority, control, or tradition, and the act of rebellion. And here, these guys are going to take action. And so they rose up before Moses, together with some of the sons of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, chosen in the assembly, men of renown. Now, if remember, I can kind of give you a little background. Moses told Aaron to go out and pick some, basically Moses was taking on a lot on himself, okay, a lot. And so he kind of voiced his I hate to say disapproval, but his concerns to the Lord, and the Lord said, well, hey, go out and pick some leaders, okay? And that's true. A lot of times in these, when there's a lead, there's a lot on a leader, okay? And I'm going to pick on Chris. I'm just going to let you know right now, I'm going to pick on you here in this class, okay? There are some leaders that want to be leaders. There are some that are reluctantly become leaders. And there are leaders that are just natural leaders. Okay. And that's just, I can think of several people that I would just follow regardless. If they say, come on, here I go. Then there's other leaders that I go, well, wait a minute, tell me what your motive is, what your stuff is. And so there are some people like that. And there are some leaders that I would say don't want to be leaders. I could agree, I don't want that responsibility, but they see the need. And if people are, and if people need it, then they see the need. So I really appreciate, there's all types of how they become leaders. Okay. And because what's one of the first things that people do when you become a leader? Okay. Yeah. You're doing this all wrong. Okay. You're doing this all wrong. That was a horrible decision. Why are you bringing us out from when we had a good life? They were slaves. They had a good life in Egypt. No, they just said they were comfortable. Okay. And then here is this guy. Good grief. What does this guy do? What does Moses do? He goes up on a mountain for 40 days, and we don't know where he is and don't know if he's dead or not. Okay. Then you bring us out into this desert. You're making all these promises. And wait a minute. You're the only one that can talk to God. Okay. And so you can see where these things happen. And what did Moses' own brother and sister do as well? Okay. So Moses was under attack a lot. Now, so Chris, here's one of the, and he was a reluctant leader. Yeah. I always say at the burning bush, Moses he was screaming and scratching and clawing. He didn't want to do that. And I want to say at some point, he knew what the kind of people they were. He'd been around them in Egypt anyway, so he knew what they were. And so he didn't really want to do that. And so, but it's really kind of funny. Let's go on, read a little bit before I pick on Chris. And they rose up against Moses. And in verse 3, and they assembled together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you have gone far enough. For all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Now, Now, if they were just kind of the community, that's one thing. But these guys were chosen by, they were Levites. They were chosen to take care of the tabernacle. They were chosen to do a certain task. And so they had a little bit of authority themselves. Okay. So, well, why did they choose to question Moses? Could it be that they either wanted more, or they know more than management, or they more know? How many times have we done that? I've done it myself. Hey, I'm doing the work on the front line. I'm face to face with the client. I know what's going on. Management is up in their ivory tower. They don't have a clue what I'm doing. Okay, they don't have a clue. All they see is numbers. Does that sound familiar? And I'm sitting there going, okay, hey, management, I know more than you do. Okay, and I've been there. Okay, so I'm a vital part. You guys are a vital part of where you're working, and a good management would come down and say and interact with you. And that we have good management in our company, by the way. But there are times when I'm going through a stressful situation, going through these things, and I'm just saying, management, you're just not paying attention. I know more than you do. Let me make that decision. And so here, it's not exactly the same. I mean, what makes it different between my management, my company, or your company, and what these guys are doing? Who is Moses? Yeah. Okay. I'm standing up here. I'm Moses, and I say, I'm God's chosen. Do you believe me? I mean, could it be that these guys just go, okay, you say you're God's chosen, you go up on a mountain for 40 days and come back, and what evidence did they have that Moses was God's chosen? There's one thing. Okay, should have been. Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Good point. Good point. It, it all comes down to like human ego, right? Yeah. Yes. So, so actually, what you guys are saying, and this is kind of the point, uh, Moses was not out. Like you said, he was a reluctant leader, but he's doing what God wanted him to do. He was following God. God said, "You're the leader," and I know why. A lot of times, God picks things because it shows His power. If you take a weak person and make him a leader, that shows the power of God, not the power of Moses. Okay, uh, how many? did God tell Paul when he asked for that thorn to come out of his? He had a thorn in his side. The grace is sufficient, and what else is after that? He's known for making strong things out of weak. Weak becomes strong because of God. Yeah. Right. And so and Aaron was an eloquent speaker. Everything, he brought him on to speak for him in occasions. But then there was so these guys were probably, if they were chosen to be, and there's about another 250 men, and of course we'll see what happens to them here in a little bit. But they followed this rebellion, and they were going to be against Moses. Moses was a reluctant leader, as we mentioned, but he was doing what God said, and and are they really rebelling? If they rebel against Moses, if they think about it, who are they really rebelling against? And they're against God, of course. That's right. Right. And yeah, well, let's go on. I want to mention something else as far as leaders go, and let's go on in verse 8 there, where Moses is saying to Korah, "Hear now, you sons of Levi." He points it out. Hey, you sons of Levi, y'all were chosen, and he says that. Is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them? He's saying, isn't that enough? I mean, you were special chosen. And why were they special chosen? Because they stood by Moses. The Levites stood by Moses at the golden calf incident. And so he chose them because of their faith in their. So he reminds them, hey, sons of Levi. Um, and that he has brought you near, Korah, and all your brothers, sons of Levi, with you, and are seeking for the priesthood also. I mean, you're chosen to do a certain task, and now you want it all. You want this as well. Therefore, you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. But as for Aaron, who is he that you grumble against him? And then Moses sent a summons to Dathan and Abiram, Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, we will not come up. Is it not enough that you have brought us up out of a land? Listen to this. This is what caught me when I read this. Is it not enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey, to have us die in the wilderness, but you would also lord it over us? What did Moses, or what did they say? Where were they going? Is this kind of a jab against that? Is this saying, hey, we came from a land flowing with milk and honey? And is that true? That was their experience. And they called it the land of milk and honey because that's what Moses said, that's where we're going to. They have no clue what they're about to see. Well, except for what I guess this is after the spies. So they had an idea based on the reports from the spies. So they knew where they're going. But this is a jab against Moses and against God, saying, "Hey, we came from a land of milk and honey." Is it really that great in Egypt? I mean, it was a great country at the time. It's what they knew. Yeah, the fish gets bigger. Yeah. Right. Right. Yep. And I'm the same way with overeating. I mean, once I see a meal in front of me, I just that plate. I can't have an empty spot on my plate. I got to have it all full. So I always tell people. So I learned this from a smoker one time, and she told me, "I'll put down my cigarette if you put down your fork," and that taught me something. I was kind of humbled by that. I said, "Well, you know what? She's got a point." Um, anyway, now let's see what Moses does. This is kind of interesting. Now, I don't want to focus too much on this because this is not the idea of this lesson. Um, but there's a couple of charges against Moses and Aaron. First of all, they said you've gone too far and you've monopolized things. You and Aaron are monopolizing these things. And is it? And then Moses asked them, "Is it not enough that?" Oh no, they asked Moses, "Is it not enough that you brought us out of the land of milk and honey?" So there's several charges going on against that. And then in verse 13 and 14, um, in verse 13, well, Moses sent for Dathan and Abiram. I always mess this up. I'm sorry. I need to take some Jewish names 101 or something. Um, but look at what he says. Is it not enough that you have brought us up out of the land of milk, flowing with milk and honey, to have us die in the wilderness, but you would also lord it over us? What's this accusation against Moses? What are they saying? They, yeah, yeah. Why are you forcing this on us? You think you're so high almighty. You got this one-on-one relationship with God. Oh, boo! Now you just seem to kind of Lord. Moses has to take control of it. God has kind of put him in charge and said, "I got a job to do. Okay, you got a job to do." And it's just this just comes to the point where they say, "Okay, hey, who are you to lord all this over us? We're holy and we're just as good as you." Well, that's not ever what Moses wanted to do. He was meek. He was humble, um, and and this was just really an attack and made Moses feel bad because he became very angry and said to the Lord, "Do not regard their offering. I have not taken a single donkey from them, nor have I done harm to any of them." And Moses said to Korah, "You and all your company present before the Lord tomorrow. Present before the Lord tomorrow, both you and along with Aaron." And so, anyways, the story goes, the rebellion is is put down because the Lord steps in, of course. And in verse 20, I'm going to skip over a few things. But in verse 20, the Lord said to Moses, uh, is this a timer? Okay. But anyway, then the Lord's, well, that's the first time that happened. You guys need to jump around a little more. Did it one time when Bruce was speaking. Oh, did he? Okay. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, verse 20, and said, "Separate yourselves from among this congregation that I may consume them instantly." But they fell on their faces and said, "O God, thou God of the spirits of all flesh, when one man sins, wilt thou be angry with the entire congregation?" Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the congregation, saying, Get back from around the dwellings of Korah and Dathan and Abiram." And when Moses arose and went to Dathan and Abiram with the elders of the Israel following him, and he spoke to the congregation, saying, "Depart now from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be swept away in all their sin." And so they got their punishment. But what I think is interesting here is how Moses, even though they attacked him and they went after him and just did this rebellion, uh, there have been times that Moses has appealed to God to save the people, And sometimes he does it, but then this time, what is wrong with it? Is this, well, I view this as saying, okay, Moses, I hear you, I appreciate you, but we got to get this evil. You got to get this. Now look at where they are. Where are they going? They're as a group going to the promised land. They're going to the land of milk and honey. And you don't need these dissenters. They don't need this trouble. You need unity. You don't need these type of things in this and just disrupting. Because what happens when that happens? It started off basically with all these millions of people, but there's 250 people and their families. Can that spread? Okay. And it's the Lord is pretty much saying, let's nip it in the bud right here. Now, the one thing that I really appreciate about God, I really like how he does things. And he could snap his finger. He created the world, boom, with a word. He could snap his fingers, but what good is that? What would Moses and Aaron and all the congregation, what would they learn if he just snapped his finger and said, okay, these guys, and just zap, they're gone. They're in puff of smoke. Yeah. Right. What would the rest of the congregation, the rest of the children, they're watching all this. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now let's see. We've got a little bit of time, so as always, we have to rush through through these things. But let's apply it to today. Let's apply it. Are we satisfied? Somebody turn over to 1 Corinthians 12. Go ahead.
Why did the children?
Hey, I'll make you happy. I read something the other day that I had never thought of before. I was reading about it and I just came across. They say did Moses never ever touch foot on the promised land? Excuse me, transfiguration. He was there. He touched, here's a guy that God said, you're not going to enter the promised land in your life, but he came back and he was part of that as a witness, as a confirmation that Jesus was the Son of God. So, I mean, yeah, that's right. Okay. But I thought that was kind of a neat observation. Yeah.
I don't need to be so literal. I'll be thinking about it. That's true.
It does say later on the sons of Korah were not. Okay. The families of the Reubenites, it sounds like they all followed up. But with Korah, it does sound like his sons were not. Yeah. Later. Yeah, that really, it does kind of give us, it does. Yeah. Yeah, well, you got to remember we're trying to get the lesson out of it rather than the literal, history. Yeah, right. But let's look at 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 18. And I think this really kind of ties into what we're talking about, what's doing here. Look at what Korah and his group tried to do. So Paul is talking and says, but now God has placed the members, each one of them in the body, just as he desired. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now there are many members, but one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I give no need of you, or again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, it is much truer that the members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary, and those members of the body which we deem less honorable, on these be bestowed more abundant honor, or our unseemly members come to have more abundant seamlessly. Whereas our seeming members have no need of it, but God has so composed the body, giving more abundant honor to that member which lacked it. So basically, we're looking about at the body. He's using that as everybody has a role. Okay, uh, there are times when we need to step back and realize what our role is. Okay, we may not have, my. How many times have you got a sticker in the foot and your arm hurts or something? You know how that, there's something that kind of trails through the body. Thinking about the body, I was brought to attention one time. So what what amazes you about God, uh, or what brings you to know that He is? And I think I'm just kind of in awe of the human body, the nature around us, and all that, and everything, the animals and stuff. But who could have put this, together so perfectly? All right. And who's to say that the eye is more important than the ear? You lose one of those and you'll realize how important it is. And so this is where, it kind of ties back to here. Moses had a role, Aaron had a role, the Levites had a role, Korah even had a role. All these people had a role and they had a job to do. And don't try to do somebody else's job. Now, I said I would pick on Chris. How many people in the congregation try to be elders? Okay. I don't mean to pick on you, but you probably run into people like that in your role.
Well, okay, very
Do what? Yeah. Isn't pleading for them, right? Get rid of them, right? Now that's really when we're talking about leadership in Moses, it's tough to be a leader because you're going to get questioned on pretty much on everything you do. Why didn't you get here on time? There's this guy that real good guy, but he would always be 5 minutes late. He's one of our managers. He's one of our managers, and managers are supposed to be there 15 minutes early, but he would always be 5 minutes late, and so he got kind of berated. Now that doesn't mean he'd stay an hour, maybe hour and a half late, but somehow getting kids to school, doing whatever, he was 5 minutes late. And he got berated for that. And all the other things that he did great, he was a great manager. All the other things that he was just kind of forgotten because he was 5 minutes late. Okay. So leaders are always on the pedestal. They're always up there ready to be thrown. And what we as followers, how can you have a leader if you don't have any followers? Okay. And you got to have, well, we got to remember the role that we're in. And we just say, okay, leader, he's got so much more. He looks at the broad picture. We're looking at our little world. I'm going to do my job the way I can. In fact, I'll just kind of do another personal example. My position at my job right now is we have at Tyler, there's two softwares ongoing at the same time. The new one is still being developed, still ongoing. It's the software of the future. I'm working with the old stuff. Okay. There's still clients that use our old stuff. They literally said, hey, Steve, we don't have to train you. And it'll still be here by the time we retire. And it's still true. I'm retiring in April. And so it's still there. And we don't have to train you. Can you take care of that? Can you do that over there while we train everybody else on this new stuff? I said, I'm good with that. Okay. And they literally have not worried about my section. And now to the point of where I go, hey, I got a role. That's my role. I'm not with the new stuff going future, but neither am I. I'm not going to the future, but I'm making it stable. So people that understand their role are better followers, and that makes better leaders, and it just makes a cooperative effort. That's what the body of Christ is. We all have our roles. The elders have their roles, the deacons have their roles, the ministers have their roles. We as the congregation members have our roles. Okay. Yes.
Even though they have already witnessed parents of the bird fire that they watched their fire. They had that example, they had seen. And now we have the arrogance, the exact same that came forward with fire that was not acceptable. And 250 people. I mean, I got to think about like what? Our tendency to congregation. People were to witness that. Fire come to the Lord. Burn them up.
Yeah. Would that get your attention? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that just shows you the term leader, and I've always told my son this, well, and my daughter and our daughter too. You can be a leader, either be good or you can be a leader for that. You can, like, I feel like my son is going to be a leader, but you can either do good or you can do bad. And I mean, you think about some of the people that were supposed leaders, like David Koresh. I'm like, you know what I mean? He was very charismatic, so that's what he was doing. But I mean, it's some of the leader that follow.
Well, and I had a presentation. I was talking to Chris before our class. I'm in Toastmasters, and I heard a presentation several years ago that we're all leaders, every one of us. But it may not be the head guy at the front, but we're a leader in our role, and we are. Who are we teaching? People are around us. Yeah. And Wendy, I'm glad you brought that up, but that's really something. Was it wrong for Korah and them to question Moses and Aaron? I mean, they took it too far. They took it way too far. So is it wrong for us? And you brought a good. Is it wrong for us to question what the elders are doing? And no, but they want us. They want to open a dialogue. You know, the elders don't want a dictatorship. They want a cooperative group. Yes. Yes.
Even God's first leader, yes, you're supposed to respect God, but the focus is always going to be God. You see your leader doing something that you think is not what God is. You have that opportunity. You're sitting and you don't. You have to go for that person.
Yeah, that's one thing my mom impressed on me the whole time she was alive. Actually, we grew up at Sunset, and that's where she was when she passed at Sunset. And she said one thing that I still don't agree with today. Says they're elders, they're God's point, but you don't question the elders. And I go, you got to, you got to question. They're human beings as well. Well, that's something that we continually disagreed on. But the thing is, you open a dialogue. Yes, Jay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But once the decision is made, what I, all my kids may be wrong, but once that decision is made, you either agree to worship God is done the same, or go. Do not cause tempt.
Do not cause control. Yeah.
Shows that who you hang around makes a big difference. Because it says that the Kohathites were for them. Well, it's not about it. That's also the same very. So they were all living.
In close proximity, right?
So again, you listen to people who come together as a body, fellowship. We all get our clicks going, start complaining about this, over all of the group, complaining about the same thing.
Yeah. And so we got our classes over, but I just want to encourage you guys to. I think the elders encourage that too. If you have a problem, talk to them. And I remember back when Chris, you and Sante, Billy Smith, and who else came on at the same. Larry. No, I don't think I talked to Larry, but Chris remembers that before I called three of them and talked to them about their eldership, and I felt moved to do that, and that was beneficial to me probably more than it was to Chris or anybody, I guess. But we had a good conversation. I go, and I was impressed. I said, I bless you, brother. You can do it. But that's really, they want that dialogue, and I think that's probably what it is. Korah and them took it too far. If they just questioned and said and got their answer and went on, but they did not understand their role, and that's what we need to do. We need to understand our role and be good guys. Okay.